Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Caroline, happy 2022. How's it going today?
I am doing really well, Bryce. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. This is our first official episode of the new year. Our last episode came out on December the 31st, and this is a big one for us because it's episode 100, which
It
is
is.
crazy to me.
I feel like we should have a confetti cannon going off right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not to get too technical, we've technically had more than 100 episodes out if you count all the bonus ones.
And I didn't join the podcast until later on, so we're not quite at my 100, but those are just technicalities,
They are.
really. And why get in the way of a reason to celebrate?
And it's funny, I was thinking about this, with this being like officially the 100th episode. I kind of feel like if we were a sitcom, we'd be in like syndication now. Like
Oh,
we'd be in the big bucks.
this would be a big deal. There would be a cake that they would wheel out on the set, and then there'd be a cast picture with everyone around it. I guess the equivalent is like you and I both like having a cupcake in our separate locations.
Yeah, probably. I mean, we
Yeah,
haven't recorded together in person in maybe almost 2 years now.
almost.
So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe we'll have to do a virtual hold up a cupcake with 100 on it, and that's our thing maybe.
Yeah. In addition to our 100th episode, which we are celebrating today, we also have a guest who is joining the Five Timers Club.
Yeah, absolutely. Big deal. She was last on our episode where we talked all about the Swedish supergroup ABBA. Katie Turzansky, welcome back to Overdue Finds. How does it feel to be a member of the exclusive Five Timers Club?
I am honored. I'd like to thank the Academy for bestowing this honor upon me. I also feel like I deserve a cupcake, so maybe we'll just need to make that happen down the road. Or actually, maybe more appropriately for what we're talking about today, a cheesecake. But
Ooh,
we'll get to that.
yes. So speaking of which, cheesecake, 100 episodes. Today, we thought it would be we wanted to do something really fun. Not that our other episodes aren't fun, but we wanted to do something really fun for today's episode. And we thought, you know what? We talked a little bit about sitcoms and syndication. And we thought, you know what? Let's talk about the Golden Girls because this is a sitcom that ran for like 177 episodes. And I just kind of felt appropriate that, unfortunately, with the passing of Betty White a couple of weeks ago, that this is a show that we should talk about because it's one that seems to have gotten more popular way more popular since it's even been on the air.
Yeah, I think that's a totally accurate read of the Golden Girls intergenerational popularity and how it's kind of exploded over the last 10 years. We had thought, let's pull back the curtain on the show. We had plans to talk about Betty White, and which we will talk about
Yeah,
Betty White. Can you imagine if we were doing today's episode, but like, no, we're not
not a single
talking
mention.
about
I mean, I could talk
her.
about B. Arthur probably for the whole time if we needed to. But
If
you're
we
right,
needed to.
we can't neglect Betty White.
It would
Mhm.
be odd. But we had planned to do the whole episode because for her, her 100th birthday was coming up on January 17th. It's our 100th episode. I mean, that was right there. That was
Just
ready to go. And then she passed away December 31st. So we thought, let's shift and celebrate one of her most famous roles as well as the work of the rest of the cast.
We're going to talk all about today, obviously, Betty White, the Golden Girls, some of our favorite sitcoms, that sort of stuff. But before we get there, of course, at the end of every episode, we always mention we love to hear from our listeners. And of course, most people listen to the podcast through various podcatcher services, whether it be Apple iTunes or Spotify or Google Podcasts. But the show is also available on YouTube. Unfortunately, you don't get to see our pretty faces, but we just have the audio from each episode available on there. And recently, Katie, it's good timing that you're here because we did get some feedback regarding our ABBA episode on YouTube. And I just wanted to quickly share it with the group because I love this. The person's name is Geordie Boy. And on YouTube, he mentioned, hey, listening to this from the UK. Thanks for the podcast. I enjoyed hearing your thoughts. I remember as an 8-year-old watching ABBA win Eurovision and saying, that should not have won. Then my parents got their greatest hits volume 1 and it all changed. 5 years later, I was watching them at Wembley Arena. He gave us the date of November 6th, 1979, and said that he still has the ticket. And he mentioned that, he's really looking forward to their upcoming concerts. And he said it's kind of like another gift to the fans, a chance for everyone to get together and sing along and be happy, which the world needs more than ever. He posted this actually on January 1st and wished us well for 2022. So, thank you so much. We just love hearing from I guess that's been the really interesting thing about doing 100 episodes of the podcast has been like getting to hear from like all these people, not just in Edmonton, just really from around the world. So it's been really cool to get feedback like that over the last few years.
Yes, and I have a follow-up question for this commenter. I want to know what they thought should win Eurovision that year. That's what I want to know. Like, it's fine to maybe think back and, oh, I don't know. Now I'm okay with ABBA's win. But at the time, I wanted to know what this 8-year-old thought the winning entry should be. So if you're listening, let me know.
Yeah, leave comments on our YouTube channel again or whatever works best for you, or email us at podcast@epl.ca. We always love hearing from listeners, and that's what's made doing this podcast. One of the things that's made doing this podcast really rewarding is hearing from people who enjoy the episodes and give us feedback. So it's one of my favorite parts anyway. So let's get into our recent Overdue Finds picks. Caroline, it's been like probably a good 3 weeks since we've actually recorded an episode. So I have a feeling, we didn't obviously record over kind of the Christmas break. So I have a feeling we both probably consumed a lot of media over that time. So we've got a backlog of titles to get through. But Katie, I'm going to start with you as a member of the Five Timers Club now. What have you been enjoying lately?
Well, so over the holidays, I read a number of basically the book version of the Hallmark Christmas movies, like those kind of rom-com, like really fun, light reads through the holidays. They were just delightful, but it feels a little late now to be sharing those. So I'm going to share what my latest binge watch was, which was season 4 of Cobra Kai. So Cobra Kai, we have seasons 1 to 3 in our collection. 4 just was released on streaming, and I'm sure we'll eventually get it in the collection as well. Is a series that started on YouTube, and it is a continuation of the Karate Kid story. So 30 years later, Johnny Lawrence, played by William Zabka, and Danny LaRusso, played by Ralph Macchio, have grown up. They have kids. They still live in the valley. They're still sort of doing karate, and they still have a strong rivalry. And through 4 seasons, they keep this Karate Kid story going. And I love this show. And I am not super into Karate Kid. Like, I had seen the movies, but I'm not like passionate about Karate Kid. But something about going back into this story from the 80s, bringing it forward into today, but like aging them appropriately. It's not just like a reboot. It's the same characters. It's all of the things that come with like having teenage children and having grown up but still having this rivalry with each other, and kind of that dive back into the references to all the 80s stuff that was in the original Karate Kid movies. I love it. I love it as like a pop culture moment. And so season 4 was released on, I think, New Year's Eve. So I have binged through all of season 4, and it was delightful.
That's a show that, I remember when it came out originally, it was like you said, on YouTube, but you had to like pay to watch it on YouTube. And I didn't watch the first season until it came out on Netflix like a couple of years ago. And it's a show that like I didn't know really what to expect. Like, it didn't like, if you look at it on paper, like, it doesn't seem like it would be, oh, there's like 4 seasons worth of content here, but there is. It's I've only watched the first 2 seasons. I'll admit I haven't had a chance to watch the next two yet, but it is really cool to see like people online, like their reaction to this show, and it's just like, it just kind of brings people back to a different time, and people are really enjoying seeing these new characters.
It's so much fun, and the way that Ralph Macchio and William Zabka, like they're still those characters, but sort of believably grown up, and they've gone on very different paths in their lives, but it still feels like the kid that dressed up as a shower to go to the school dance. Like it's a really neat kind of projection of those original movies. I really enjoy it.
It's so funny too because I remember watching How I Met Your Mother, and there's a whole episode where Barney Stinson is talking about how William Zabka in The Karate Kid was actually the protagonist of that
Yeah,
movie, and
he's the good
how
guy.
he's the good guy. Like, it
Yeah.
was, Daniel LaRusso who is the troublemaker. And it's funny because they kind of, obviously in the first couple seasons, they talk about all this stuff, like that shower at the Halloween dance,
Yeah.
and a couple other things like that. So I mean, it's just kind of fun revisiting that stuff.
And they do play back and forth in terms of who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. Are they going to team up? Are they still rivals? Back and forth over 4 seasons, and yeah, it probably is going to get old. Like, I mean, but I'm still into it.
I think if like, and the seasons are really short too. They're
Yeah, they
like,
are
what,
not that
10
long.
episodes or
Something like
something
that.
like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can easily binge it in like a weekend.
Yeah.
Caroline, how about you?
I recently read the book Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid.
I just started that today.
Really?
That's cool. Anyway, carry
Ooh.
on.
I didn't know. This is an author I have talked about on the podcast before. She wrote Daisy Jones and the Six, which I really loved, as well as Malibu Rising, which was my pick on the Overdue Finds blog post, 21 Overdue Finds for 2021. If you haven't had a chance to check out that blog post, go check it out. There's a whole bunch of really great things on there.
Mhm.
My introduction to her was with Daisy Jones and the Six, but this was, I think, her biggest kind of like breakthrough book. I originally got it confused with The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which is a completely different book, not the same at all, not similar, just they have seven in the title, and Evelyn, seven Evelyn. Um, anyway, the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is about a Hollywood star who's ready to tell the story of her life, the true story, the one that no one has ever heard before. It's a fake biography of someone who's never existed, but she's kind of like an Elizabeth Taylor, Ava Gardner figure, and it tells her experiences as an actress, as a famous person in Hollywood. Just really enjoyable. There's it breaks through every now and then to talk about the experience as she's telling this to the journalist who's writing down her life story. Really interesting, really enjoyable. Had me going to Wikipedia a few times to check out some stuff and see what was true and what maybe was fictionalized for the story for the book. But really enjoyed it and would love to see a movie based on it.
So I remember you talking about Daisy Jones and the Six, and it's still
Yeah.
a book that I think I'd really enjoy and need to read. And I remember you mentioning it was kind of like a bunch of like series of like interviews in there.
Yeah.
So is this kind of same format?
No, this one is very different. Daisy Jones and the Six is told in like transcript style. It
Okay.
reads like a script and it has like character names, colon, and then what they said, and then like it just alternates in that style. This one is the story of Evelyn Hugo recounting her life, and then every now and then it's broken into with this modern perspective from the journalist that she's working with. And the journalist has, some things going on in her own life that sometimes bleed into the questions and the perspectives that she asks. So it's more of a straightforward novel, I would say, but really interesting story about fame and love and relationships and identity.
Sounds like a good read.
So what have you been enjoying lately, Bryce?
I watched a ton of movies over kind of Christmas, and one of the movies I watched it had been kind of on my watch list for a while, just because it was in theaters here. I think it maybe only lasted a week. Now you can borrow it on DVD, and I think it's a movie that everybody should check out. It's funny because we recorded our best of 2021 episode before Christmas, and this is a movie I think might challenge for my favorite movie of 2021, and that's The Eyes of Tammy Faye. It stars Jessica Chastain and Andrew Garfield. So if you're not familiar with this movie, it's really the true life story of the 80s televangelist super couple, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. It's funny, I've talked a lot on the show about being a kid of the 80s and their Sunday morning program. It's not like we watched it at all. Like, weren't a religious family. We didn't watch them, but like I remember seeing clips of them on TV. Like Sunday morning when you have 10 channels, there's not much on. And that's something they were always in the news and everything. So unless you were around that time, it's kind of hard to really explain the popularity of them. But yeah, basically, I remember seeing clips of their show as a youngster, and a lot of it had to do with kind of some behind the scenes scandals that kind of plagued the couple. So, kind of like there was fraud, there was money laundering, which Jim Baker ended up being convicted of. Both actors are great in it, but Jessica Chastain plays Tammy Faye Baker, and she does an amazing job kind of portraying her. This one you totally forget it's just Jessica Chastain playing Tammy Faye Baker. Like she just totally, it's one of those ones where she just kind of disappears into her, and that's kind of who you see up there on the screen. But yeah, she did an amazing job of playing her, and we get to see some kind of. It's funny because before I watched this movie, I of course mostly knew about, the scandals that kind of plagued the couple, but we do get to see Tammy Faye Baker in a different light. So for example, she was standing up for the LGBTQ community and those fighting AIDS in the 80s, which caused a lot of issues with the church that they were with. And of course, Jessica Chastain, she was also nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Actress for this movie. Unfortunately, she lost, but it's still an amazing movie. We have it in our collection now. This movie is also kind of based on a documentary of the same name. We have the movie, not the documentary, but yeah, I'd love to go check out the documentary. But yeah, The Eyes of Tammy Faye is a great movie, and put a hold on it and check it out.
I wish the two of you had told me about this 80s theme that we were having today because it's not like I couldn't participate. But I'll allow it because that is a movie. Thank you for reminding me that I also want to check out. So I will have to go place a hold on that after we record.
Today we are talking about the 1980s sitcom Golden Girls. By the way, Caroline, we need to have more 80s sitcom episodes because this is my wheelhouse for sure. And I believe you've come up with some fun facts about the Golden Girls that you care to share with us, right?
I do have some, although after that introduction, I feel maybe a little bit like I'm being set up here, or we'll see. I think you could probably go from the off the top of your head, but I will start, and you can jump in if there's anything you want to add. Golden Girls aired for 7 seasons on NBC from 1985 to 1992. It was created by Susan Harris and starred B. Arthur as Dorothy, Estelle Getty as her mother Sophia, Rue McClanahan as Blanche, and Betty White as Rose. All 4 women won Emmys on the show for their work. The pilot to Golden Girls originally had a cook named Coco who was written out before the second episode because there were concerns that having this character, particularly in the kitchen where so many of the iconic scenes would later be set, that he got in the way of the dynamic relationship between the 4 women. After the finale in 1992, there was a spin-off series called The Golden Palace, where Blanche sold the house and then she, Rose, and Sophia bought a Miami hotel. They couldn't afford to hire any other staff, so they had to do all the work.
Now, do you remember how the Golden Girls, like the whole series, ended?
Yes.
Dorothy ends up getting married. Do you remember who she got married to?
A little known Canadian actor named Leslie Nielsen.
That's right. Yes.
Who played Blanche's uncle on
Oh,
the
okay.
show.
See, that part I don't remember.
Yeah. Dorothy marries into Blanche's family, and they go to live on an estate, I assume in Georgia, but I might have that part wrong. But that's why, in story terms, why Dorothy doesn't go in on this hotel with the rest of them, because she is now enjoying married life with Leslie Nielsen.
She's like, I married into cash. I'm good.
I'm good. I'm
this
set.
hotel.
Exactly. And I think they will, because in addition to the 3 of them, it also had Don Cheadle and Cheech Marin.
That's right.
Working at this Miami hotel, the Golden Palace. And that series ran for 1 season on CBS.
Yes.
Before I get back to talking about the show, I just want to mention the theme song, which I think can rightly be called iconic, was written by Andrew Gold, and it had originally reached number 25 on the Billboard charts in 1978. It was covered by Cynthia Fee for the show, and then remixed for the Golden Palace, which used the same song and like the same font, a lot of the same like background music. It's actually kind of eerie to watch clips online of the Golden Palace. But that is, of course, Thank You for Being a Friend.
Yeah, iconic. Like, yeah, I mean, if you're making a list of like the top 5 TV theme songs of all time, that has to be included in probably your top 3 at least.
When you were calling me a friend of the show, I was trying to figure out a way to work in a "Thank You for Being a Friend" reference, but I failed. But
I was thinking of saving it for the outro. You know, the part where it's like, Katie, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything you'd like to let our listeners know about? Katie, thank you for being a friend.
All right, we'll save it.
Traveled down this road and back again. Katie, so what are your experiences with Golden Girls? Like, did you grow up watching this, or is this a show that you discovered maybe later on in syndication?
I definitely watched it when it was on TV. I was very, very young. And I definitely didn't fully get it, I think. Watching it as like a preschooler, it's sort of like, oh, these grandmas are funny, and you don't really get how sharp and progressive and all of the things that make the show amazing. But I remember, and then, I mean, it was on for my entire life, right? Because it was on, and then it was always on in syndication. And so it's just, I know I've seen the whole show, even if it wasn't like in a binge from episode 1 right to the end, just because it's always been around. But I have started binging it sort of through the pandemic. It's become one of my kind of, I need to fill 25 minutes, I'm going to put on an episode while I cook dinner or something like that kind of shows. And I've been working my way through it. And it is so much better to watch from the perspective as of an adult, obviously, than it was as a kid, even though there was still an element of like slapstick and different things that appealed across ages. it's a totally different show to me now, and I was thinking about how I'm closer in age to them than to like your average high school drama at this point, and so my perspective has changed significantly. But it's kind of always been there.
Yeah, I agree, Katie. We're a similar age, and I know it was on. I definitely watched it. I remember it being kind of culturally in the air. I remember thinking watching the bumper, but when they go to commercial, and it would be just like a still shot of the show and or of the actresses, and there would be like the four of them sitting, and it like a title card that said the Golden Girls. I
Yeah.
remember thinking that it was too bad that the show wasn't called the Golden Girls show, because then each of them could have a word. That's how my brain worked at the time. I felt really bad that someone was left out.
Yeah.
Um, but I that's how I know. I remember it was uh it was on at the time. Definitely watching it. I consumed a lot of TV. So this would have been one of those things. Bryce, what about you?
Yeah, so I would have been like 6 years old when the show, like, first premiered, and, I remember watching it with my family. I don't remember exactly what season it was, but I remember, like, it was in our at the time, you had, like, a TV viewing schedule, so, if you missed the new episode of Golden Girls, you would have to wait for the summer maybe for them to repeat it on TV. So it was just there was no, PVRs. You could record episodes on VHS, I guess, but no, this was like for us as a family. I want to say this aired on like I want to say like maybe Saturday nights or something like that. Because I do remember it also aired with Empty Nest was the follow-up show after this. Now Empty Nest was a spin-off of the Golden Girls. So I remember watching those like back to back with my family. And it's funny because watching a few episodes here over the last few days, I remember it being really funny as a kid. And Katie, like you, I know for a fact I wouldn't have gotten a lot of the jokes
Yeah.
in this show, but I remember like Sophia kind of being cranky and, Rose being this, sweet lady and, they would kind of make fun of her for maybe not being the sharpest knife in the drawer. And, I found that stuff to be hilarious as a kid, but then there's stuff now like jokes about Blanche and everything.
Everything
And
Blanche says and does. Yeah,
oh,
exactly.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
I was watching it, like, last night of the episode I'm gonna talk about here in a little bit, but yeah, basically, Dorothy talks about her, like, sleeping with half the men in Florida and everything like that, and it's just funny to hear, them talk that way because, you think of 80s sitcoms and you don't think of kind of some of these, like, raunchy jokes that they're going for, but, and yeah, definitely as a kid, I didn't get half of it, but, yeah, I do remember watching most of the series, together with my family, and I remember watching the series finale and being so excited for the Golden Palace, only to be kinda disappointed, so, you needed all 4 ladies there. Cheech Marin and Don Cheadle didn't quite pick up the slack of B. Arthur.
That leads into kind of my next question that I wanted to talk about with regards to the show. Why do you think this was such a success?
I think it put a new lens on women, right? And I think that, I mean, this is stating the obvious, but I think coming from a generation that you know was aiming for like you get married and you have your kids and that's your life, to see the life that happens after that, to see these women that are empowered, that they're out working, they're independent, they have, you know, romantic lives, they have sexual lives. Um, it I don't think that TV had shown women quite like that before, and it was pivotal.
I was reading an interview with Susan Harris, the creator of the show, and she was talking about kind of how the show came to be. And she had originally been told that NBC wanted to do a show about older women. And she started writing it and kind of came up with this idea and pitched Golden Girls, which was about these women in their 60s. And NBC was like, great, we love it, but when we said older women, we were actually talking about in their 40s. And she was like, "Oh, well, this is a difference of opinion." And they kind of came to an agreement that they weren't going to specifically mention what their ages were around there. But I think, Rue McClanahan was in her 50s when the show started.
The characters are 53, 54.
Yeah.
That yeah. It's I remember watching it and thinking like, "Oh, these are old ladies." They would have been well younger than my grandmother at the time. But from my perspective, it was like, yeah, old ladies, when now if I think about someone that's 53, that's not how I would categorize them.
No, and it's funny you mention that because even like in the first episode, like it starts off where I think Rose is coming home from work or something. Dorothy talks about teaching, and that was one of those things that I totally had forgotten about. I hadn't watched the show in years, and I was like, oh, like I just assumed this whole time, looking back on it, like, oh, these are like four retired women, whereas really three of them are still working. I think I don't recall if Blanche is still working or what
Yes,
she.
she works in the museum, and
Oh,
Rose
that's
works in
right.
the
Yes.
counseling center, and Dorothy is a teacher. And Sophia doesn't work, but she volunteers at the hospital, and she has some of her own occupation. For a while, they have a food stand. They try some different things, but that's what they're working at.
And there's even an episode, it's touched on a couple times, where Rose is working because she has to.
Yeah.
Her husband, when he passed away, didn't leave her with a lot, certainly not what her daughter thinks is there. And I yeah, I think you're right, Katie. These were stories that had never been told by actresses who were just these incredible talents.
And I think that's the other part of it in terms of making it a success. Like the perfect combination of phenomenally talented actors in this show. Like you will never be able to touch this combination of women. And the just the chemistry between them, your B. Arthur deadpan dryness up against the Betty White as Rose Nyland, just the Great Herring War, kind of your St. Olaf stories and all like the whole thing. Like it's just I don't know that you could ever do it again. Like I don't think it was just luck. I think it was designed that way, but it's almost untouchable in terms of who they were able to bring together and how they were able to play off of each other.
Mhm. Yeah, it's still. I remember as a kid finding out that like Estelle Getty plays Sophia was actually younger in real life than B. Arthur. I was just like, wait, what?
She was younger than all of them. She was the youngest Golden Girl,
Yeah.
and Betty White was the oldest Golden Girl.
I
Like
mean,
it,
that's acting.
right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
Estelle Getty got a facelift at one point in the series. Did you read this? And they had to already she was wearing so much makeup to make her look like she was in her 80s or whatever, and they had to do so much more because she actually looked so much younger than the rest of them.
Yeah, I was reading on IMDb just some facts about it, and yeah, that came up. I think she got the facelift. It might have been after the first or second season. Like it was fairly early in the show run, and they come back to shoot the next season, and the makeup artists are just like, "What happened? Like, what are you doing?" And apparently, it took them almost an hour to apply her makeup for each episode. So yeah, it's kind of funny to think about now, and and I went and watched some episodes. It's like you can kind of see in some shots. It's kind of like, oh yeah, they have that makeup caked on pretty good.
But it wasn't in that much definition back in the
No,
80s, right? Like
no,
we're seeing a totally different level of yeah.
There was snow on the
Yeah,
screen, and
exactly.
you had
Your
to get
rabbit
out.
ears were crooked and
You had to turn the rotor every now and then.
no. I think one of the other things too that made this show so successful was it was so much different than what was currently on and popular at the time. Um, obviously, you have the sitcom starring four older women, which even in 2021, putting that on TV, I imagine probably most networks would still be nervous about presenting a sitcom like this, which is really sad. But I think that's just unfortunately the how TV works these days. But it was so much different than like your Who's the Bosses and your Growing Pains. There was a lot of these like family sitcoms that were on every single major network. So, you had the typical storyline with the family, and there'd be two or three kids, and they would kind of recycle through the similar storylines. But here you have this series starring older women, and then also, like you said too, Katie, they're talking about sex. They're making jokes about dying, or being in the hospital, and all this stuff. And some, like you said also too, about not having enough money. So the episode, I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, the episode I watched, they're going to come across this crisis where they don't have enough money for something that they really need. So yeah, it was different. And for the mid 1980s, it was kind of an edgy sitcom.
Even the premise, these are four single women that are living together because they can't afford to live on their own.
Mm.
And it's both the finances of that, but then there's also, speaking to that isolation, and the community that can come from living together. And I think we still, as a society, don't have that right. The isolation that comes with aging, and you hear about adults that go in and buy homes together, and that sense of community from that. And I mean, the Golden Girls were doing it 30 years ago. Like,
Before I started kind of rewatching the show more frequently recently, I had in my head a narrative around they only had each other, which is not true. Like, they have families. Many of all of them have kids. Some of them have living parents, siblings. Dorothy has Stan. There are these. They have family, and they have chosen to be with this found family, and I think that that is something that resonates past the time that it was set in. I think there's a really important message there, particularly when seen through the lens of isolation, and creating your own group, creating your life beyond, who you were born into.
I don't know if everybody watched the pilot episode, but it was kind of interesting because in the pilot episode, Blanche starts seeing this other guy, and she sees this other man. She talks about it. She's pretty sure that he's going to propose to her. And the rest of the episode is, most of the, Rose especially is nervous because she knows that if Blanche marries this other guy, they're going to have to move out and find a different place. And it was hard enough for them to kind of find each other, and they become like this family and everything. So and by the way, most times sitcom like pilot episodes are not very good. If you go back and watch a lot of like your favorite shows, watch the first episode and you'll be like, this doesn't quite hold up. Pretty much all the elements are still there from episode 1 to the last few episodes anyway, with the exception of that the cook Coco, who I was like, I don't know who this is, I don't remember this, but yeah, he disappeared after that first episode. But all the elements are still there, and it's still a really good pilot.
they polish it up, but you're right. Like it's there and it's funny. And there are interviews with each of them saying like they got that script and were blown away by it from the beginning, because the writing is so excellent.
And I get the sense, I mean, I'm not in their heads, but I get the sense that right away the actresses knew who their characters were. And so that gave them that freedom to have the amazing timing, the physical comedy as well, with like stage blocking and people moving in and out. Like, there's just so many great scenes or moments that are just them being the characters.
And many of the three of them had worked together before as well in different projects. Not Estelle Getty, she was a relatively new actor at the time, but the other three had worked on different things, on Maude and other shows. But actually, in terms of who the characters were, thank you, Caroline, they changed the casting uh, fairly quick before they produced the pilot, they had actually wanted Betty White to be Blanche, and they had wanted Rue McClanahan to be Rose. And it was okay. They're strong actors, but it was such an echo of characters they'd played before, and so they flipped it. And there's some interviews, particularly of Rue McClanahan, talking about how Betty White created Rose immediately, and just reading, even unprepared, reading for her, that character came to life in a way that they hadn't really anticipated. And it was when they made that switch that they convinced B. Arthur to join the show, because she didn't want to play against the same people doing the same characters that she had before. But that's what was the hook for her, that, oh, this is an interesting flip, and finally got her on board. It was effectively written for B. Arthur. The character is described as a B. Arthur type in the script for the pilot, but she was hesitant until the other casting fell into place.
Yeah, she's like, I don't want to play Maud again, basically.
Yeah.
I love that it was for a B. Arthur type, because when Betty White, and this was something I learned when I was preparing for our supposed to be Betty White episode, but when they were creating the character of Sue Ann Nivens on the Mary Tyler Moore show, um, they wrote it as someone who could play that sweet Betty White type and then have an edge to her. So like these were solid actresses that they
Yeah.
were getting. These were people who know it and knew the language of a sitcom,
Yeah.
how that rhythm works. It's specific, particularly to this time in the 80s with the camera setup and everything and the pacing. They knew it. They just were so good at their jobs, and now we get to enjoy it all these years later.
And it was demanding. Like, a primetime sitcom at that time, they would do an episode a week, and they would see the script on Monday, and they'd have it filmed by Friday. And like, it was seriously full-time work, in a way that I think that we've definitely changed how we watch TV, and we've changed how we make TV. And they're not necessarily filming one episode at a time anymore, and it doesn't look the same way that it did then. But I mean, they worked hard to do this for as long as they did, and they kept it awesome all the way through.
I'd read somewhere that Estelle Getty, since she had the least acting experience, actually got quite nervous when it came to those. They would film on a Friday night, and she would get really nervous and get stage fright. And it was something, I guess, that she kind of struggled with through the entire run of the series, which is incredible to watch, incredible to think about, because she does such an amazing job. She's so sharp on that show, and you can't picture Estelle Getty, Sophia being nervous of being in front of a studio audience, which is so kind of interesting to me, knowing that, especially as the show got more popular, people probably just were so lucky to even get tickets to a taping and be excited just to see them. So it's interesting to think that she had stage fright on those nights. So one of the things that when we talked about doing this episode, I thought it'd be really fun if we each watched an episode of the series before we recorded. And I thought, hey, let's share which episode we watched and why people should check it out. So it sounds like all three of us watched several episodes. So Katie, what episode do you want to share that you watched recently that you think people should check out?
I mean, there's so many good ones, and I have so many favorite moments, but the episode that I picked is the second episode of season 2. It is called Ladies of the Evening. And in this episode, Blanche wins 3, not 4, 3 tickets to a concert and a party with Burt Reynolds. And they are excited. This is the big time. But of course, there are only 3. And naturally, Dorothy, Rose, and Blanche are going to go, and Sophia is feeling left out. To make matters worse, they have 3 different infestations in their home at this time, and the home is being fumigated. So they can't leave Sophia at home because they need to leave the house. So they decide they're going to make a weekend of this. They're going to get a hotel down by Miami Beach. Well, we can't afford a hotel by Miami Beach. Well, Blanche is going to go scope it out and find one that they can afford. This is going to be so much fun. So they get to their hotel, and of course they're all dressed. They dress up for this, and we haven't talked about this, but the clothes that they wore on this show, it's just the amount of like flowy sequin things that they could find. Also, random fact, Rue McClanahan wrote into her contract that she would get to keep all of her clothes. She kept everything she wore on the show, which I think is just amazing. But so they're dressed up for this Burt Reynolds thing. They're like ready to go. Sophia is like faking a call from Publishers Clearinghouse to try to distract them so that she can steal a ticket away from them or something like that. They're down in the lobby. They're going to have a drink before they go. And the police barge in because it's not so much a hotel as a brothel. And Blanche was like, "Well, I just picked the hotel with the most men in the lobby," as Blanche would. Turns out they are customers. And the gentlemen in the bar are like, trying to pick the girls up. And they are confused, except for Blanche, who's like, naturally, this is what men do. Anyway, they all get arrested for prostitution. And so, in their flowing, sequined outfits, they end up in a jail cell with the ladies of the evening that were also arrested with them. And so, you can imagine that, they are. This is, unimaginable to them. And it's delightful. Sophia comes to bail them out, and they have some words. And in the end, Sophia takes the tickets and runs, leaves them in jail. And by the end of the episode, Sophia is regaling them with stories of her night with Burt Reynolds, who does make an appearance at the end of the episode. And of course, the three of them are all quite chagrined by the whole thing. It I mean, it's hilarious. Although I think in some ways, I don't know that it's as funny as it was then, because the thought part of the humor there is that, like, who would pay these women for sex? Like, that in and of itself is funny, and I'm not sure that that is as funny as it maybe was at the time. And we know from this show that they have, active sex lives. Like, it's not unheard of that they are sexual entities, but I mean, it is delightful. And Rose sitting in the jail talking about how she missed out on being the butter queen back in St. Olaf, and she's got bitter butter memories. This is, missing Burt Reynolds is as bad as missing out on Butter Queen. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I think if I would have seen that description, I probably would have watched that.
It's pretty great.
Caroline, how about you? Which episode did you watch?
Mine is gonna it's a nice counterpart to Katie's hilarious recapping of that episode. Mine is the episode 72 Hours from season 5, episode 17. Rose gets a letter from a hospital where she recently, in the past couple years, had surgery. And they tell her that because of a blood transfusion that she may have been exposed to HIV. So she has to go to the hospital where they test her for HIV, and the results are not instantaneous. She has to go home and wait 72 hours to find out whether she has it or not. And the episode kind of opens with her getting this letter and struggling to process it. She's angry, she's confused, she's afraid, she's nervous. When the other women, there's a subplot where Dorothy is planning a Save the Wetlands event that they're trying to get celebrity items for an auction, but the main plot is supporting Rose as she's going through this. And when they go to the hospital, uh, Rose is a little nervous, a little embarrassed. She doesn't really want everyone to know why she's there. So they say, well, you can use any name. It doesn't have to be yours. You can give any name. So she gives Dorothy's Bornak, and then like it just cuts to like reaction shots of Dorothy as like Rose is like spelling it at the top of her lungs, and then when she has to go in, they're calling for Dorothy's Bornak, and while they are waiting to go in for the test, it has what is my favorite Rose St. Olaf story. I was thinking about this. I mentioned this to you, Bryce. I honestly think when I watched this, it was the hardest I laughed in all of 2021 watching Betty White tell this story. And it opens with Betty White saying, I haven't been this scared since 1952 when St. Olaf's most active volcano threatened to erupt. It involves druid priests. I can't watch this episode for a number of reasons, but that her delivery on it is just picture perfect. It always is. We've talked
Yeah.
about it. We've talked about how great Betty White is and as Rose, but to have such a funny moment in this really serious episode, it goes through all the beats that you would expect of an 80s sitcom. This episode aired in February of 1990, but really it was addressing late 80s understanding of HIV and AIDS, and the idea that it could affect people in multiple ways, including someone who may have been exposed to it during an unrelated surgery. There's a moment in there where Rose and kind of basically says to Blanche, like, "Why not you? You sleep around a lot." And Blanche has to talk honestly to Rose about that's not what this isn't a punishment. This isn't a judgment. This is just something that you are facing right now. 1990 in the AIDS kind of chronology, this was pre Magic Johnson revealing he had HIV. This was before Freddie Mercury died. This was before the Red Ribbon campaign with AIDS. So using a show like this to touch on some more serious subjects while still being incredibly funny, I think is just how good of a show this is.
And they didn't shy away. I mean, obviously, serious topic there. They tackled racism. Uh, Several times they tackled homophobia and different biases and prejudices related to that. They were for sure ahead of their time in terms of some of the things that they were willing to put front and center, and talk about in a really open way.
Yeah, like you said earlier, Katie, it was a very, especially now when you go back and you look at it, it was a very progressive show. Like you said, handling very, topics that a lot of sitcoms and shows were kind of shying away from during that time.
Yeah. So that's my hilarious episode. Bryce, what about you? Which episode did you check out?
So the one that I want to talk about, it was not a very special episode, unfortunately, but it was an episode I enjoyed. It was from season 4. It was episode 11. It was called The Auction. So at the beginning of the episode, we find out that there's a leak in the roof and the ladies need to get it fixed. So they have this guy come, the repairman. He can either, patch it up for a couple $100, or if you need to get a new roof, it's going to be $10,000. Now, in the meantime, of course, with Blanche's job at the museum, there's an art show that they want to go to, and they want to meet this artist named Jasper de Kimmel, who turns out at this art show is really rude to Rose, makes fun of her clothing and the women in general, and basically saying how Rose isn't smart, and it's terrible hearing somebody talk that way about Rose. So of course you hate this guy already. So we find out a little bit later on, though, that since Sophia volunteers at the hospital, she actually found out that Jasper is going to pass away in a couple of days if he doesn't get a rare blood transfusion. Now, the ladies realize that if they buy one of his art pieces and he dies here in a few days, which Sophia mentions he's supposed to, that the value of his art is going to go through the roof, not, sorry.
I think they put that in there just so that we could have this moment.
I think so, yeah. So
40 years later.
But it's really interesting because we we hear the women talking about this repair cost, and there's four of them, and they don't, and $10,000 in 1980. Not that $10,000 isn't a lot of money in 2021. It is a lot of money, but even more so in kind of the mid 80s. The women talk about how they don't have that much in their savings to cover the cost of this new roof. So hence why they get this idea together, like, you know what, if we buy this art, this guy croaks, not only will we have enough money, we can buy this piece, sell it, and then make some extra money on top of it. So, of course, they go to the auction, which is hilarious. Imagine Rose at an auction with the little paddle. And so they end up buying the piece. And they find out a few minutes later, they call Sophia to let her know that, hey, they got the piece for a little bit lower than what they were hoping to pay for it. Only for Sophia to break the news to them that he is going to live, the artist, and it's all thanks to a rare blood donation from none other than Sophia herself. So the women are in a pickle now because they've spent all this money on this piece of art that they don't even like by this jerk artist. The repairman, comes to their house to kind of talk to them about the repairs. Turns out he is a huge art lover, sees this piece, and basically says that he will replace their roof in exchange for this art piece. So it was really funny. I thought we got to see a very 1980s art gallery, which was awesome. And yeah, just kind of the Dorothy's reaction to finding out that her mom Sophia saved this guy's life, of course, because Sophia can be kind of she can kind of come across as a little gruff at times and tough, but at the end of the day, she knew that she could help save this guy's life, even if he was a jerk. And yeah, they save his life. Everything all works out in the end, like most sitcoms do. But yeah, it was a really fun episode to watch, and I definitely want to go back and watch even more now.
Yeah, this is always the danger with these episodes. I now have a few more things to check out. So many TV shows are getting revisited now. Do you think that a remake of the Golden Girls would work?
They just redid Sex and the City, right? They just brought them back. Those women are this age, and it's such an interesting perspective in terms of what we see women in their 50s as. And I mean, it's night and day if you compare the Golden Girls to the Sex and the City women. And I don't know, I think it would be really different. And like I said before, I don't know that you could recreate the magic of the casting and the chemistry and the timing of this. And I can't imagine not being disappointed by it. It's perfect. And it's never not been on TV, and I just wouldn't want to see someone crash it into the ground,
Yeah, I think where I landed is somewhere similar, where I think there are stories to be told in this area, but leave the Golden Girls alone. And I know that, I mean, I don't know, but with Hollywood, a lot trends on like name recognition or being part of a franchise, a property that, if a new Golden Girls was airing, more people might check that out than an unrelated sitcom with a different name. But where I think I landed on this was tell the stories, but leave these characters as is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, create your own Golden Girls, if you will. Don't try and replicate it. I kind of feel the same way. I don't think a remake would work at all. I don't think it would be well received. It's kind of funny because, like, I mean, we've talked about this in the past with, kind of older movies where, like, let's face it, in 50 years or whatever, there will be a remake eventually of, Back to the Future and Lord of the Rings and all these other, really popular movies. It will eventually happen. And something like this, and like Golden Girls, as we mentioned earlier, it's more popular than ever. Like, I mean, you can buy merchandise, including like Funko figures. There's Chia Pet heads. There was a online petition for a Lego set. But yeah, I don't care who you cast, but yeah, I just think people would hate it. The only way I think this works, in my opinion, is let's say that NBC or whoever is like, we are doing a remake. I think they go kind of the Bel Air route with, I'm not sure if everybody here had a chance to see the trailer for the like Fresh Prince of Bel Air remake, but it's kind of more of like a dramedy type, probably more of a drama anyway. I mean, if you wanted to keep the name Golden Girls and keep it in Miami, maybe it does turn into not so much a like a 2-camera sitcom, but it's more of a a drama following these 4 widowed women or divorced or whatever as they kind of navigate their lives in Miami together. But I don't know, I don't get what the point of that is.
And I don't want to watch that. Like, I
No.
think you're right that there's space. We need these stories as well. And like, how many sitcoms about single 20 somethings do we need? Like, where are our single 40 and 50 somethings? We need those. And Caroline, you and I have talked about how I'm drawn to grown-ups in TV somehow in this decade. I'm transitioning from wanting to watch like your Friends kind of sitcoms into wanting to watch the Golden Girls and other things that have like adults.
From
But
wanting to watch The Karate Kid to wanting to watch Cobra Kai.
exactly. But it shouldn't be this. I think we need to tell those stories. We need to tell women's stories, and we need to tell diverse stories, and not just the Friends at Central Perk kind of stories, but in a new way. Let's get some new voices in there, and let's leave this intact as what it was, very of its time, but also so far beyond it, and that's really special.
The other
Mhm.
thing I think I would be nervous about of a remake or reboot or like touching it in some way is of what it would be reduced to. Because when I went back to watching it after having a mostly cultural understanding of it for the majority of my life. Like I say, I definitely watched it. It was definitely on. It was always on. But I hadn't really been actively watching it. It was it it was more than I thought it was going to be. I remember watching it, and I think a character like Sophia in my head, like, I knew that she would throw off these, like, one-liners and had a mean streak or to it. She also has, like, so much love. She loves Dorothy, and I think that it would be easier for her to be cast as, like, an angry, hateful person who doesn't have those dimensions to her, and then it would just become a show about, like, sex and cheesecake, which, I mean, I'll watch, but
We're not going to say no to that show, but it doesn't have as much depth.
and it's not all of the things that this was.
Talking about the depth of Sophia, one of the best episodes. Sorry, I'm just going to sneak another episode in here. I don't know exactly. It's in the first half of the series, but there's an episode where they follow a day in the life of Sophia. Basically, the other 3, it's a rainy day. They don't want to do anything. They're sitting eating their cheesecake in their pajamas, and they're talking about how worried they are about Sophia. She doesn't have enough in her life. She's not busy, and she's going to just sort of fade away if she's not busy. So the 3 of them proceed to do nothing all day while talking about how Sophia does nothing all day, and then we see what Sophia does in a day, and the people in the community she's connected to, her work in the hospital, the various sort of stops on her day, and the impact that she has. And I think it's actually such a great episode, and this window, not just the lives of women in their 50s, but like the rich life of this woman in her 80s, and how meaningful it is, and as you say, how rounded that character is. It's a really delightful episode.
We talk a lot about the St. Olaf stories, but Sophia's Picture It, Sicily, 1934 stories are also great. Not
How
quite
does
as
she not have an accent? This I
That's
keep
true. Yeah.
wondering as I'm watching this. She came as like a teenager, I'm just so confused. But anyway, that's an aside.
It led to such a great moment when Estelle Getty won the Emmy for her portrayal. She opens her speech with "Picture it, Los Angeles," and it's just like this really sweet, funny moment that was good to see. I think that's another thing that I like about it, just knowing that they all were recognized
Yeah.
Mhm.
for their work on the show.
All right, so let's move into our quick roundtable questions. Before we recorded today, Caroline, you sent out a link to a BuzzFeed quiz, which allowed us to figure out which Golden Girls we would be. So, Katie, you took the quiz, I assume.
I did.
Which
Yes.
Golden Girl are you?
Blanche Devereaux.
Oh.
I know. I was like, well. BuzzFeed described Blanche as fun-loving and outgoing, with a large personality and always down for a good time. And I was like, yeah, I could probably see that. I mean, honestly, there isn't a bad answer here. I want to be all of the Golden Girls, but yeah, I am apparently Blanche.
There you go.
Blanche Devereaux and Rue McClanahan are two chef's kisses of names.
Yeah,
Both
yeah,
perfect.
it's true. It's true. I feel like in some ways she gets undersold in the show, because she's sort of like the sexy one or whatever, and I think that there's like all of them, there's quite a bit of depth to that character, and I think sometimes it's easy to just see that top layer of it, but she also, we talk about Betty White, we talk about B. Arthur, but she does a phenomenal job in the show as well, as I mean they all do.
Caroline, which Golden Girl are you?
Rose, I enjoy life's simple pleasures. Thank you, BuzzFeed.
I also took the quiz. There was no answer for Stanley. So I ended up also getting Rose, which I thought was kind of funny. I thought I might get Dorothy in it. Maybe a little cranky and stuff. So I was a little surprised I got Rose, but that's okay. I mean, if I had to pick, I get probably my favorite character. It would have been Rose anyway. But yeah, Caroline, like you, yeah, I kind of enjoy the simple pleasures in life and care deeply for other people that are in your life. So that's what BuzzFeed said about Rose. All right, so Betty White, of course, she was a staple panelist on various game shows for decades. What game show would you most like to be on, Katie?
My grandmother thinks I should go on Jeopardy because whenever we watch it together, she thinks I know all the answers. I think her bar is pretty low, but I actually, relatedly, and I feel like one of the times I was on, we talked about the back-to-back of Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. I think I would actually pick Wheel of Fortune. I think that one's fun, and I think I'd have a better shot than I would on actual Jeopardy.
I think we did because I love asking people if they grew up in a Jeopardy Wheel of Fortune or Wheel of Fortune Jeopardy area. That's one of my staple questions.
How did your syndication deals work out? What was being aired first? Caroline, which game show are you going on?
I would love to go on the game show Talk About, which was a Canadian game show in the late 80s that was rebroadcast on Game Show TV. It's kind of like Outburst. I don't know if you knew that game, where you have like 20 seconds to name as many words related to a topic as you can, and then there's guessing involved. I love Talk About. I have since I was little. But since it's no longer in existence, I also chose Family Feud.
Oh yeah.
I spend a lot of time thinking about who my Family Feud lineup would be. And honestly, I'm not even kidding. This was when my sister got engaged and was seeing her now husband. I was thinking, I think he would be good on a Family Feud lineup. So
You're like, you got a
yeah.
good one lined up there. He
Yeah,
would make
it's
the
like
cut.
I think this is gonna work out. Yeah. Bryce?
For me, I've talked about my experience being in the crowd of a taping of this show, and that's The Price is Right. Cheryl and I, for our honeymoon. We went down to Los Angeles in the hopes of getting on The Price is Right. We were in the crowd. You can see us on the episode. We do not make it on stage, but I would love for a second shot of being in the audience, because I know what I would do differently while waiting to get in and how to act in front of the producers in the hopes of me getting my name called.
What would
But
be your dream game on The Price is
Plinko,
Right?
for sure.
Yeah,
Plinko's, you're guaranteed to win some money.
that's
You're
true.
not.
Well,
Some of the car games where you got to guess prices with the cars, they can be a little challenging. But Plinko, you're guaranteed to be walking out of there with some cash. All right, so last question. We of course hit our 100th episode, and I want to thank everybody for listening. But what is a topic that you really want us to cover at some point in the next 100 episodes, hopefully, of Overdue Finds? Katie, you're invited back to join us on another recording. What do you hope that topic is?
I actually think we need to do some kind of a word on the street thing and talk to our customers. I think we need to have some kind of a customer interview show, or like a speaker's corner box where we could like record our customers in the branches. I think there's a lot of potential here. But I have to say, listening to this last discussion, I kind of want like a game show as well,
Mhm.
because like there's some rich ground there for us to pull some good stories from as well. So I don't know, but yeah, my initial thought was like, let's take it to the people.
Yeah, that's a very similar episode has kind of been on our radar for a bit, and hopefully post COVID, and
Yeah.
once it's safe to do so, that'll be something that we definitely hope to do. Caroline, how about you? Is it a figure skating episode?
no, it's my favorite runner-up, animated movies. I
Oh
hope
yeah.
that it's always our kind of backup episode where
Yeah.
Bryce and I both know that if we get to a point where other things fall through, we could talk about them with little notice. But usually everything works out, and so we've never had to actually go with animated movies, but I think it's their time to shine.
Yeah, at some point that episode will happen. And when you hear that episode happen, you'll know that
You'll
some
know that something
scheduling
went
fell
wrong.
through. And yeah, pretty much. It was our last resort, and we needed to get an episode out in time.
What about you, Bryce?
Mine, of course, this also has been brought up a few times, and I think it would be really fun, is our pro wrestling episode of Overdue Finds. In addition to WWE, of course, is very popular, but I do think looking at the history of it, there's a lot to unpack there with its history here in Alberta, with like the Hart family in Calgary and running shows here in Edmonton. Yeah, I just think it would be a really interesting topic to dive into. And I still remember, Caroline, at one of our podcast meetings where we talked about it briefly, and you kind of dove into the storyline of when Triple H married Stephanie McMahon and all the twists and turns that came with that. Like, you were enthralled.
I was not prepared. I was not prepared for what I was about to experience. That's for
Yes.
There's
sure.
there's
Yeah.
also good fiction, like films and shows about this that I think about Glow that was released on
Mhm.
Netflix about women's wrestling. That movie Wrestling with My Family.
Yeah.
There's like some actually really good shows and things out there, telling some of the stories and just providing some insight. Because yeah, on the surface it looks like one thing, but there's some more stuff going on there with some of that professional wrestling stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm in. Set a date and we will discuss it. Katie, thank you for being a friend. We really appreciate you being here today to talk about the Golden Girls and to help us celebrate our 100th episode.
Happy birthday, you guys.
Thank you. Is there anything that you would like to let our listeners know about?
I think just a reminder for our customers that library takeout, our curbside service, is still available at our branches. We've been so happy to have people back in our space, but especially as numbers are going up, if people are wanting to get that curbside service to pick up their holds, that is still available. So a reminder to still make use of some of that more distanced access to our services, whether that is library takeout, whether that is some of our virtual resources that we have, and remembering too that we can provide book bags and book lists through our personal picks services as well, which allows you to have some of that staff support in selecting material without having to come into our space if you're not comfortable doing that right now.
I worked on a personal picks pack the other day, and it was a lot of fun. So
We
get
love
those
doing that.
requests in.
Send those requests in. We love and the more specific, the more tricky it is for us, but we dive right into that. So if you're only interested in mysteries set in World War II that star talking cats, we will figure that out for you.
I just want to say too, before we wrap up today, of course, mentioned a lot that this is our 100th episode. I just want to thank everybody, by the way, for listening. Even if this is like your very first episode that you're checking out, or if you've been a listener since day one, yeah, we really appreciate you tuning in, listening to us talk about pop culture and everything else in between here over the last few years. And yeah, we definitely wouldn't have made it to 100 episodes if it wasn't for people listening and giving us, that positive feedback. And a couple thanks I want to throw out, of course, to Caroline for always being an awesome co-host, and our podcast team, Meg, Camila, Kathy, Maria, always helping out behind the scenes and doing things like editing and doing up our show notes, which we always talk about and encourage people to go check out. Some of our leadership team like Anna Alfonso and Tina Thomas, and also some former staff members like our first co-host Kim Bates, Allison Silva, who played a big role in helping us kind of come up with the name of Overdue Finds. So there's lots of people to thank, and yeah, I just from the bottom of my heart thank everybody who's tuned in and helps put the show together.
Thank you, Bryce. You've talked in the past about how you kind of had this idea, this dream for a podcast, and it's been a lot of fun working on it. So here's to 100 more episodes.
Yes, hopefully we'll get that animated movies episode in here at some point.
And the pro wrestling for sure.
Yes, yes.
We hope that everyone listening has enjoyed today's episode. If you haven't done so yet, we encourage you to subscribe so that you get all of our new episodes. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, and also tell a friend about the show.
Yeah. And don't forget that we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, we love to hear from our listeners. So you can reach us on Twitter at epl.ca and use the hashtag EPL Overdue Finds, or you can also email us at podcast@epl.ca. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.